Major funding for Election 2018 AETN debates is provided by AARP Arkansas.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Debate Week on the Arkansas Educational Television Network continues at this hour with the candidates for Congress in the 4th District. In alphabetical order, the nominees: Hayden Catherine Schammel, the Democratic Party challenger, and U.S. Representative Bruce Westerman, the incumbent and the Republican nominee. A footnote: just a few minutes before the onset of our broadcast tonight, Tom Canada, the Libertarian candidate, informed AETN that he would not be able to participate in tonight's debate. So they're with Mr. Canada's absence tonight. Our panelists will be questioned this evening by a panel of Arkansas reporters: Madeline LaRue of the El Dorado News-Times, Alex Teagues of the Magnolia Banner News, and Gretchen Ritchie of the Malvern Daily Record. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Each will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. Rebuttals are limited to 1 minute. And at the conclusion of tonight's debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order of opening statements, questioning, rebuttals, and closing statements was determined prior to the broadcast by a drawing in which the candidates or their representatives participated. Our timekeeper tonight is Fred Whitehour of AETN, and with that, our first opening statement, Mr. Westerman.
Thank you, Steve. It's always good to be here in the AETN studio. I want to welcome my challenger to the stage. I want to commend AETN for the role you play in the election process. Greetings to everyone in the studio audience and to all of you listening online and watching on TV. Welcome to the debate. I'm a lifelong resident of Arkansas in the 4th District, where my wife Sharon and I raised our 4 children. I grew up in the country, in a family with an older brother, a younger brother, a father who worked hard every day, and a mother who worked just as hard as a stay-at-home mom. My parents not only taught us about work, and they gave us all the things, physical needs that we had. They met those, but they taught us about unconditional love. My older brother was the first in our family to ever graduate from college. I'm a proud product of the public school system, and I owe a debt of gratitude to those teachers who gave their time and effort to my development as a young man. I went to the University of Arkansas, where I walked on and played football for the Razorbacks for 4 years. I earned my engineering degree there, and that's where I met Sharon. Later, I went to Yale University, where I got a master's degree in forestry. In Congress, there's only a handful of engineers, and there's only one forester in the House. I worked for 2.5 decades in the private sector. I was the president of the school board, the minority leader in the state legislature, and the majority leader. It's been an honor and a privilege to take my upbringing, my education, and my experience to Washington, D.C. to serve you. I look forward, because of my policy positions, because of my record, and because of my unwavering commitment to work hard for the great American citizens of the 4th District of Arkansas, to make the case today why you need to retain me as your representative in Congress.
Mr. Westerman, thank you. Ms. Schammel, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to AETN and to the panelists tonight for providing questions, to Bruce and to all of the viewers tonight for tuning in. My name is Hayden Schammel, and I am seeking your vote as the next United States Congresswoman from Arkansas's 4th District. My background is in education, and I've spent my career teaching in high schools and community colleges all across South and Central Arkansas. My husband, TC, is a high school football coach, and he and I have a beautiful 4-year-old daughter named Ella. So why Congress, right? I get that question quite often. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." I believe that we can have a better tomorrow for all of Arkansas, and I won't quit fighting until we get there. At the very heart of my campaign are 3 key issues. First, significantly lowering the cost of prescription medications for Arkansas families. Second, expanding educational opportunities throughout the state, and in particular, fighting for our rural school districts. And finally, ensuring that all of our people can have a livable and decent wage so that they can take care of their families the way they deserve. I know that in Arkansas, we're better than the divisiveness that we're seeing played out on the national stage. Here in Arkansas, we value faith, family, and a better future for all of our children. And I can pledge to you this: as your next Congresswoman, I will fight every day for those Arkansas values. Thank you. My name is Hayden Shamel. I'm asking for your vote, and I look forward to tonight's conversation.
Ms. Shamel, thank you very much. Our first question tonight goes first to Mr. Westerman, and it's from Ms. LaRue.
Representative Westerman, a Supreme Court ruling from June has opened the door for individual states to pass legislation requiring that internet retailers collect local sales taxes on purchases regardless of whether they have a physical presence in the state. Do you believe Congress should pass any federal legislation aimed at what's been called marketplace fairness, and why or why not?
Thank you, Madeline. That's an important question that a lot of small towns and communities in the 4th District are concerned about. And as you know now, a lot of online retailers already are collecting those taxes and sending them back. I know there has been efforts. Congressman Womack from Arkansas has a bill that he has pushed to codify it into law. If the Supreme Court rules that that's constitutional for that to happen, and they continue to push that, then I think Congress should go along and pass a law to put that into effect. There's a similar issue that I'm a co-sponsor on a bill where Congress has said that you cannot have life without parole for juveniles. I've got a bill that's a bipartisan bill that we're following along with the court's decision, that we've got it in Congress to codify that and make it so that you can't sentence a juvenile to life in prison without parole. Doesn't mean they'll get parole, but it means they can't be sentenced to life without any chance of parole. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Shaw.
Yes, I would support that legislation on a federal level. I do want to point out a lot of things about internet that have been going on recently. In particular, I'd like to point out that my opponent, Bruce, voted against net neutrality. And I really want to make the point tonight that it's very important for us to understand exactly what that means for Arkansas. What that means is that internet service providers can speed up or slow down service at their own discretion. It also means that they can block access from certain sites. And I want you to imagine this. Imagine an ISP being able to tell you what news sites you can read and what you can't read. I can't agree with a vote like that. I would support that legislation on the federal level, and I just think it's another example of why we need to have a congresswoman in Arkansas who supports the people above all.
Mr. Westerman, you have 1 minute for rebuttal, sir.
Okay, and I would like to ask people, when was the internet broken? Because it was the Obama administration, at the end of the administration, that put these net neutrality laws in effect, but they never took place. This does not slow the internet down, as has been portrayed. It allows people to have access to the internet. It allows competition in the internet. And as we talk about the internet in rural Arkansas, we have money in the Farm Bill to expand rural broadband services, a Farm Bill that I've supported. I'm a conferee on the committee, and it's being blocked by Senate Democrats. So the internet's not broken. We haven't changed anything, and you've never had this so-called net neutrality in place.
Thank you, sir. Our next question comes from Alex Teagues, and it goes first to Mr. Westerman.
Okay. So Governor Asa Hutchinson and Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin have signaled their opposition to Issue 5 on the November ballot, that issue being a minimum wage hike to $11 an hour by 2021. However, there are companies like Amazon who have recently upped their starting wage to $15 an hour, and they will have a presence in Arkansas soon. So do you agree with the measures outlined in the current act, and why? Or if not, do you think anything should be done to the minimum wage?
Thank you, Alex. So first off, more power to Amazon. That's what the free marketplace allows. It allows a company to come in and to pay whatever wage they can afford to pay. I'm not for a mandatory minimum wage or hiking the minimum wage. I concur with the governor and lieutenant governor on that. you have to ask yourself if $15 is enough or if $12 is enough, where does this ever stop? Why not make the minimum wage $25 or $30 an hour if that's going to fix everything in the economy? Minimum wage jobs are starting jobs. They're not meant to be careers. And right now we have a fantastic job market. People who are searching for a job are in the driver's seat right now. We have opportunities for career and technical education, for development, so that you can start at a job and advance. And guess what? You don't have to have a college degree. You could get a 2-year degree or a high school degree, and the job market is begging for employees right now. We've seen the lowest employment numbers in 50 years. In Arkansas, we're at 3.6%. Across the country, it's as low as we've seen. We've seen the lowest rate for women, and the job market is continuing to grow just like the economy is continuing to grow. We've got more jobs available right now than we have people to fill those jobs. So again, I'm not for a mandatory minimum wage, and I'm for letting the market forces dictate that. And you have to ask yourself, if a mandatory minimum wage is a good thing, where do you ever stop? Why not pay $50 or $100 an hour? Thank you, Alex.
Ms. Schammel, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Alex. This is an excellent question, and a question that could not show more of the contrast between myself and my opponent. Tonight, I need for the viewers to know that I am in complete support of raising the minimum wage, because I know that our people shouldn't have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. There shouldn't even be a category called working poor. Now, my opponent travels the southern part of Arkansas touting the low unemployment numbers, but an article in Business Insider last week ranked Arkansas 49th, the 49th worst economy in the United States. And we know that the numbers in South Arkansas show us that 1 out of every 4 children and elderly right now are living in poverty. And the way that we help people is by meeting them where they are. That's the difference between myself and my opponent. I'm working for the people, not for profits. And I know that what we have to do is to help people, to care about them, to equip them with what they need to be successful in life. And that's exactly what I'm going to do when I'm elected to Congress this November.
Mr. Westerman?
Well, again, if it's a good thing to increase the minimum wage, where do you stop? Use your reason and logic. I'm for the people. I'm for businesses. It's businesses and individuals that grow our economy. I'm deeper than hashtags and memes like you've been hearing. We have more opportunity in Arkansas. That opportunity is increasing. We're seeing not only unemployment rates decreasing, but we're seeing wages grow. And thanks to the work that we did on regulatory reform and tax cuts in the United States Congress that President Trump signed into law, we're seeing wages increase as well.
Thank you, sir. Next question comes from Gretchen Ritchie, and it goes first to Ms. Schammel.
If elected, how do you propose to make health care more affordable to Arkansans?
Thank you. That's an extremely important question. I think one of the most important questions, one that I hear over and over again on the campaign trail as I travel South Arkansas. So healthcare is extremely important. In fact, one of the central issues to my campaign is lowering the cost of prescription medications for Arkansas families. I'm an educator. My husband is also an educator. We both have educators insurance, which is relatively decent insurance. But even when we go to the pharmacy to pick up common prescription medications for our daughter Ella, that cost can often be hundreds of dollars out of pocket. And for many of our residents in South Arkansas, they have to make a decision between that prescription medication and putting food on the table at night. That should not be the reality, not in 2018. I'm fighting to lower the cost of prescription medications for all of our people, and I'm fighting to do that in 3 ways. First of all, to allow Medicare to negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies, because that would lower the prices. Second, we need to end what are called pay-for-delay tactics. And if you're unfamiliar with what those are, that's where these major pharmaceutical companies go in and they pay off generic drug makers to keep their drugs from hitting the market. And finally, we need to allow imports on common prescription medications from places like Canada, where they pay half the cost of what we pay here at home. What it comes down to is this, a fundamental difference in philosophy. I believe that healthcare should be both affordable and accessible for all people, and we've got to work to make it that way. My opponent, on the other hand, stood on the House floor, and what he did was argue against Medicaid expansion. Look up the speech. And what that is arguing against our kids, the insurance that my students depend on. It comes down to a difference in philosophy, and I'm going to fight every single day as your next Congresswoman to make sure that your health care is more affordable.
Mr. Westerman, 2 minutes.
Boy, is it a difference in philosophy. It's a philosophy that put the Affordable Care Act into place. As Republicans, we proposed a repeal and replace bill to that. It passed out of the House without a single Democratic vote. Unfortunately, it failed in the Senate, but we haven't stopped working on health care. And guess what? The Democrats in Congress haven't stopped working on health care either. Nancy Pelosi and her friends have filed a bill that they call Medicare for All. Well, guess what? It's not going to look anything like Medicare if it gets passed into law. What it's going to do is destroy Medicare. It's going to shut down the VA. It's going to end all private insurance. And it's going to be a big government-run health care program that looks a lot more like Medicaid for all than Medicare for all. I've got a bill that I've worked on personally that looks at market influences in health care and it limits the government's role in programs like the Medicaid expansion. My opponent talked about prescription drugs. She's right, we've got to lower prescription drugs. But prescription drugs only make up 15 to 20% of the cost of health care that now is approaching 20% of our gross national product goes to health care expenses. There's bipartisan legislation. Senator Leahy, Democrat in the Senate, has proposed this legislation. I've got that language in my bill. It creates competition. It deals with the PBMs, which was a part of the Affordable Care Act that I want to commend the Arkansas legislature for putting the best regulations in place in the country on PBMs, on the pharmaceutical benefit managers. It allows generic drugs and it prevents drug manufacturers from making new drugs just by slightly changing the formula and being able to sell them as brand name drugs. But we've got to do a lot more than just prescription drugs. We've got to address all the issues of health care, and it's way more than we can talk about in a 2-minute response.
All right, you have 1 minute to respond, Ms. Shum.
Yes, it is true that we've got to do everything we can to reduce the cost of health care for the American public and in particular for the residents of South Arkansas. And that includes making certain that our copays and that our premiums are more affordable. The difference between me and my opponent is that I'm willing to work on both sides of the aisle to find solutions that help our people, because above all, that's what's important. What's important is caring about people. And in this nation right now, more than ever, we need to elect representatives that are going to look out for the people first. My opponent voted to dismantle the ACA and voted against those pre-existing conditions that so many of our Arkansas residents face. We have to have someone who ultimately looks out for us, who looks out for our health care and making certain that it's affordable. And I can promise you that when I'm elected to Congress in November, I will do that.
Our next question comes from Alex Stiegel, and it goes first to Ms. Shum.
Okay. The recent bipartisan effort shown by the House and the Senate on the opioid epidemic showed Americans that liberals and conservatives can work together for a greater cause. What is your top priority that you want to see more bipartisan effort shown toward?
Well, I would go back to the fact that we need to lower prescription medication costs. That's my top priority. So prescription medication costs are important, education is important, and jobs in South Arkansas are important. But to speak particularly to your question about the opioid epidemic, it's a sad reality for people in South Arkansas. Almost every single one of us knows someone who has been affected by addiction. And opioid use in South Arkansas, sadly, oftentimes is an escape from the severe economic conditions in South Arkansas. We have to do more, and that's why I was so pleased to see the bipartisan legislation come forward. I believe in South Arkansas, what we need to do is expand our state services so that people can get the help that they need. We also need to work to make certain that our families remain intact, because again, All of us know someone who's been affected by this, and that's why it's so important to work together on issues like the opioid crisis, on issues like lowering prescription medication costs, like education, and like ensuring that our people have livable and decent wages.
Mr. Westerman.
Thank you for that question, Alex. And we have worked in a bipartisan effort to address the opioid crisis, from appropriating more money for things like mental health professionals, for drug interdiction programs. But first off, I got to stop and clarify something that my challenger said. She said that we voted to end coverage for pre-existing conditions, and nothing could be more wrong than that. The bill we passed out of the House still covered pre-existing conditions. It covered your children who are in college. It did away with none of that, but Nancy Pelosi seems to want to make that a talking point. That is just not so, and we've not proposed any bill that does that in Congress. Now, the difference between Republicans and Democrats on health care is we actually read the bills that we pass before we pass them. The opioid epidemic is one that, again, everybody knows someone that's been affected by it. One of the big problems with opioids in this country is the way they freely flow across our border. I've visited the southern border. I've seen people apprehended with opiates down on the southern border. If you go to the Customs and Border Patrol website, you will see that in one fiscal year, they collected over 1,000 pounds of fentanyl. That's how much they collected. Now, since 2 to 3 milligrams of fentanyl is a lethal dose, that's enough to take out over half of our population. That's what Customs and Border Patrol apprehended coming across the border. Who knows how much actually got here? So a big part of that opioid fight is securing our southern border, giving our Customs and Border Patrol agents the access they need and the ability to stop that flow.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Schammel, 1 minute.
Right now in Arkansas, we have more prescriptions than we have people living here. And a sad statistic is this: 1 out of every 5 teens will have tried medical prescriptions before they even reach high school. We are ranked number 1 in the nation in terms of teen opioid abuse, and we've got to do more. We've got to do more to help our people. But I want to say this tonight. My opponent has mentioned Nancy Pelosi twice, and I want to make it clear to the viewers who are listening tonight and who are watching. I'm not Nancy Pelosi. My name is Hayden Schammel. My dad is a cattle rancher. My husband is a high school football coach. My papa was a veteran, and he taught me to respect our flag and our military. My nanny taught me to get down on my knees every single night and pray. I am Hayden Schammel, and I'm fighting for you, and I'll fight for you every single day when I'm elected to Congress.
Gretchen Ritchie has our next question, and it is directed first to Mr. Westerman.
Mr. Westerman, what would you do to, I look on the tariffs in Arkansas, what would you do to protect the Arkansas farmers and ranchers and businesses from higher tariffs?
Well, obviously the tariffs are something that are being done by the administration, and the Senate has more jurisdiction over trade policies. What we have been doing is communicating back to the administration on how certain tariffs are damaging to Arkansas, and they keep saying, give us a little more time, or we're going to get this worked out, and it's going to be better than it was before we went in. I personally don't like tariffs because they're a tax, but I certainly understand what the administration is doing. They're trying to reduce our trade deficit, and they're making that work. And we're seeing these agreements take place. We saw one with the European Union, we're seeing one with Mexico, and with Canada, with Japan, and we'll eventually see an agreement with China. And I think American producers will be much better off in the long run after we get our trade deficit reduced. In May, our trade deficit hit a low. It was still $43 billion in the month of May. That's how much our trade deficit was when it was down by about $2 billion. So there's a lot of work to do on our trade deficit, and I know the administration is working hard to do that. Now, my opponent wants to distance herself from Nancy Pelosi, but she might want to tell you about the letter she wrote to Democratic members of Congress and Nancy Pelosi, begging them for their endorsement, for their money, and for their advice. And I don't know if she got their endorsements or their advice, but apparently she got their endorsements for their money, but she apparently got their advice because she's really good at using their talking points.
Ms. Schammel, 2 minutes.
Okay, to the question on trade first. Sadly, the decisions of this administration have done nothing but punish rural states like Arkansas the most. Here in Arkansas, our soybean farmers produce 3.5 million acres per year. And since the decisions of this administration have come out, we've seen those prices of soybean bushels fall by over 20%. What I'm worried about most are the people of South Arkansas, are the farmers who live here, the people who live here. And we know that these retaliatory trade practices and that these tariffs are doing nothing but hurting American consumers and American farmers. In fact, we've had to give welfare to our farmers here in Arkansas just to make up for the problem that we created. We should be looking out for Arkansas interests first. I'll say again to my opponent to respond to his comment, I'm not Nancy Pelosi. I don't intend to vote for Nancy Pelosi as leadership. The reason that I'm running for Congress is because I believe we need new leadership. And even bringing that up just speaks to the deep, deep divide that we have here in our country right now, this deep partisan divide. You know, I'm running for Congress to help heal that divide because I know in Arkansas that's not who we are. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that the true test of a person's character lies not where they stand in times of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of great challenge and controversy. And I believe that we are living in those times. I know that we can be a hopeful nation again, an inclusive nation, a kind nation, a forgiving nation, and above all, a nation that works together. That's who we are here in Arkansas, and that's the type of Arkansas I'm seeking for us to return to, and I will make certain that I'll fight for you every single day when I'm elected to Congress this November.
And Mr. Westerman, 1 minute for rebuttal.
So I'm a conferee on the Farm Bill that's being blocked by Senate Democrats. It is very important to Arkansas farmers. And I would like for my opponent to go look at these hardworking Arkansas farmers and tell them that the insurance programs they receive from the federal government is welfare. I think they would strongly disagree with that. I'd also like to remind my opponent, who talks a lot about South Arkansas, which is very important to the district, that the district has 33 counties, and it goes 1 county shy of Missouri. So I'm working not just for South Arkansas, for South Central Arkansas, but also for the River Valley and all the way up into Madison County. And I know that we're seeing jobs increase, we're seeing manufacturing come back, and my opponent and her colleagues, or what she would like to be her colleagues in D.C., want to deny that good things are happening. But good things are happening, and there's a bright future ahead in America.
All right, our next question is from Ms. LaRue, and it goes first to Ms. Schammel.
Ms. Schammel, the United States has seen many high-profile mass shootings in the last few years. As a potential representative for a large portion of Arkansas, what do you see as the best solution to balancing citizens' Second Amendment rights while doing the best possible job to ensure public safety?
Thank you, Madeline. That's an extremely important question. And as you pointed out, we've just seen tragedy after tragedy strike in the United States due to these mass shootings. And as an educator, I know exactly what it's like to have to be hyper aware that at any time you could have an active shooter situation come up on your campus. I believe that we need to take a two-pronged approach to this. First, I believe that we need to have an armed security presence on every single campus in the state of Arkansas. And that's because, particularly in our part of Arkansas, wait time for rural school districts to get emergency responders can be up to 20 minutes. And that's just 20 minutes way too long in a situation like that. Second, I believe that we need to have ongoing active shooter training, and it cannot be a one-stop shop. It has to be something that we continually address time and time and time again, because the number one priority for us has to be the safety of our students. I've traveled all 33 counties in this district, from Texarkana all the way up to Madison County, all the way over to the eastern border. We've put 12,500 miles on the campaign van, and everywhere we go, people are concerned. They're concerned about safety, and I want to tell the viewers tonight that safety of our students, safety of Arkansans will be my number one priority when I'm elected to Congress this November.
Mr. Westerman, 2 minutes.
I find it interesting that my challenger wants to parrot some of the talking points that she heard from a seminar or a meeting we had at Lake Hamilton School, which is a leader in school safety. They've been doing this for over 25 years. Before the Columbine shooting, before the Jonesboro shooting, they were proactive in teaching their personnel how to react to an active shooter situation. What did my opponent's campaign do? They protested when Attorney General Sessions came to Lake Hamilton for this seminar, and I find it interesting that she wants to talk about some very important points. Maybe they learned something from that meeting, that we need to make our schools a harder target, that we need to be able to do things like Lake Hamilton has done, to have armed personnel inside the school, not just school resource officers, but also trained safety officers that have been through extensive training to deal with this situation. They've worked very closely with local law enforcement. They do tests, they go through the scenarios, because it does take a long time for law enforcement to get to these rural campuses. It can take up to 10 to 20 minutes, and we know that in an active shooting situation that every 10 seconds there's a victim. So we've got to be more prepared. We've got to harden our campuses, and Lake Hamilton and others in the 4th District have done a great job at doing that. The federal government wanted to come to Arkansas to see what we've done, and they wanted to be able to share that with others all across the country. And again, my opponent's campaign went out and protested that meeting.
Ms. Schammel, 1 minute.
First, I'd like to address what Bruce is saying about protesting Lake Hamilton. That could not be further from the truth. The Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, was supposed to visit Garland County. And as you know, what we're seeing is the dismantling of our public education system. That's what our rally was about. It was about bringing to light the importance of public education and how important it is for us to put our educators, our administrators, and our students and communities first. But to return to the central issue here, which is that issue of school safety, Bruce and I both agree that we have to do everything that we can to make certain that our students' safety is the #1 priority, and that's exactly what I'm fighting for. You know, my opponent would like for you to believe that you can paint me into a box, paint me into a Nancy Pelosi or into Democrats, but you can't do that. I'm a gun owner. I will always fight to protect our right to bear arms. Just let somebody come and try to take my gun away from me. I believe that we have to have armed security presence, and I will fight for that in Arkansas.
Mr. Teagues has our next question, and it goes first to Mr. Westerman.
Do you support or oppose voter ID laws, specifically the changes outlined in Issue 2 in the November election? Why or why not?
I'm a strong supporter of voter ID laws. When I was in the state legislature, I helped sponsor and pass legislation to put voter ID laws in place. Those got challenged by the court, and they're being put on the ballot now. But there's nothing more sacred than the ballot box in Arkansas or across our country. And while we're talking about voting, in Congress, we had a resolution a few weeks ago, a resolution to say that only American citizens can vote in the United States, to support what the Constitution says, because there are those out there in liberal cities who want to let anybody that wants to vote in our elections. I was shocked, utterly shocked, to find out that there were 141 Democrats that voted either no or present on supporting that resolution. That's the divide we're seeing in this country. We talk about bipartisanship and working together. There's certain things we cannot give in on, and one of those is the sanctity of the ballot box. When I was the majority leader in the State House, Governor Beebe he vetoed our legislation. It came back to the House, and we overrode his veto, because we know that people in Arkansas think that if you need an ID to open a checking account, if you need an ID to buy alcohol or tobacco, then my goodness, you need an ID to go to the polls and vote. And the legislature is even providing a way to give people free IDs if they don't have one. And what I've heard from county employees across the state that have these machines to give free IDs, that nobody is coming in and getting them, because everybody already has an ID for the most part. And if they don't have one, they can easily go in and get one.
Ms. Schammel, 2 minutes.
I'm not theoretically or philosophically opposed to voter ID. It's easy for Bruce or for me to present an ID when we go to vote. What my concern is about voter ID laws and the direction that they're headed in this country is for people like our elderly who maybe don't have an ID. And not just that, to bring up Bruce's point about free places where you can print IDs, you know, we don't do a good enough job about getting education out there for our people to even know what resources exist. What I worry about is disenfranchising voters. What I know that we need to be doing, particularly right now at this point in our American history, is encouraging as many American citizens to get out and to vote in the midterm elections as we possibly can. Because let me tell you, it's never been more important for us to get involved, to be part of the political process. That's why I'm running for Congress, because I believe that we can make positive change. So in answer to the question particularly, I'm not philosophically opposed to it. What I worry about are people like our elderly who maybe don't have that ID and don't have access to those resources to get that ID, and that we're disenfranchising voters, when what we should be doing is encouraging voters to get involved with the political process.
Rebuttal, 1 minute, Mr. Westerman.
Well, I guess if you adhere to the beliefs of a party that nationwide thinks you should be able to let anybody come into the polls and vote, you wouldn't necessarily be for voter ID either. Again, the ballot box, the sanctity of that is critical to the foundations of our country, and we have to protect that. And voter ID is a common sense, easy way to do that. There's ways you can have provisional ballots. If you forget your ID, the system can work, and I think it should be passed into law in Arkansas and get this issue settled once and for all. I wish it was settled nationwide.
I believe we have time for at least another question, and Ms. Ritchie goes to Ms. Schammel.
Do you support or oppose the term limits as they're outlined in issue 3 on the November ballot?
You know, I believe that when you're elected to office, you should be elected to office to get your goals accomplished. I have 3 goals running for this particular campaign: to lower prescription medication costs, to make certain that we expand educational opportunities throughout the state, and to ensure that our people in Arkansas can earn a livable and decent wage. What we've gotten away from is that we've got long-term politics, long-term politicians who stay in office longer than perhaps they need to. I want you to know my personal opinion on this. I see it as a contract position. My students ask me every day, Mrs. Schammel, when you're elected to Congress in November, are you ever going to return to teaching? The answer that I give them is yes. Of course I'm going to return to teaching. I'm going to return to teaching after I've done as much good as I can possibly do for our American public as the next Congresswoman.
Mr. Westerman.
So when term limits were first on the ballot in Arkansas, I voted for that. I was later elected to the State House and understand what it's like to have 3 two-year term limits. You give tremendous power to the bureaucrats who are entrenched in state government, and you give power to the lobbyists. You don't allow legislators time to learn how to legislate, to find the bathrooms, to find the legislative group that drafts bills. There's a lot of positives to term limits, but there's also some downsides to term limits. I think the issue that's on the ballot right now is too restrictive, but I think we do need term limits still in the state. People ask me all the time, why don't we change it where congressmen don't have to run for office every 2 years? I say, well, that's because our founders put it in the Constitution that being in the House of Representatives is a 2-year term. The reason it is because the House is the first branch or first part of Article 1 mentioned in the Constitution. We are the people's house. We're the closest to the people. We need to be back home talking to the people, making the case for why we should serve them in Congress. We have term limits. Our founders put term limits in the Constitution. It's called an election, and it happens every 2 years. I wish that more people would get out and vote, and that we would be able to debate the issues, and that the people would determine how long you serve in office based on the elections in November.
Ms. Schammel, 1 minute.
I think that's exactly what the people will do this November when they decide who they're going to send to office as their next United States Congresswoman. I don't believe that we need lifelong politicians in office. I think that's what's causing part of the political divide that we're seeing in this country right now. The partisanship on both sides is awful. You know, over the course of the past few years, I've stopped allowing my daughter to watch television. I read all of my news. This partisanship has to do in large part with politicians who believe it's their job to keep power. And what they've forgotten is that what matters most at the end of the day is taking care of people. And that's exactly what I intend to do when I'm elected to United States Congress this November.
Mr. Teagues has the next question, and it goes first to Mr. Westerman.
Okay. So if elected or re-elected, what is your number one top priority of business in your first 100 days when it comes to sponsoring or co-sponsoring legislation that will benefit Arkansans?
Thank you for that question, Alex. I'm glad we're able to talk about policy here. And one of my top priorities is with health care. I've got a bill that I've been working on over a year. It's currently being scored by the CBO with the idea of protecting pre-existing conditions, being able to stay on your parents' insurance while you're in college, and it also has to score from the CBO where it covers more people and costs less money. Because at the end of the day, the way our system's set up in Washington, how the CBO scores something, unfortunately, determines who's going to support it and who's going to oppose it. So if we can get a bill that covers more people and costs less money, I think that can get broad across the aisle support. As I mentioned earlier, that has the bipartisan prescription drug program in there that Senator Leahy has proposed. That's a big issue of mine. I've also will continue to work on making our federal forest healthy. One thing I've learned in Congress is that it's a grind. In football terms, it's 2 or 3 yards in a cloud of dust. You can't always get a Hail Mary pass, or in baseball terms, you can't get a grand slam. You've got to work on small issues, get them included in legislation, and move the ball down the field, and that's exactly what we've been doing. Republicans in Congress with the Trump administration have been getting results. Democrats in Congress are part of the resistance, and they continue to want to be part of the resistance. They've already got bills filed to impeach President Trump. They've got this big government health care bill filed. They've got, they're talking about impeaching Judge Kavanaugh, and he's just barely taken the bench. So at the end of the day, we've got to keep working to make America better. And we can't do that if we're going to have Nancy Pelosi sitting in the speaker's chair being a resistor to everything that happens.
Ms. Schammel, 2 minutes.
My number one priority the first 100 days in office is to significantly lower the cost of prescription medications for Arkansas families. As I told you earlier in the evening, it is so important for our families to be able to improve and to be able to pay for those prescription medication costs that are just, frankly, outrageously expensive. Everywhere that I go, all of the people that I talk to, whether it's paying for their insulin or even for common prescription medications, things that the doctor prescribes for just colds, that money that's coming out of their pocket, it's too much. And the first 100 days that I'm elected to office, I'm going to work to significantly lower the cost of prescription medications. And as I outlined before, what I'm fighting to ensure is that Medicare can negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies, that we end pay for delay tactics so that these major pharmaceutical companies are held accountable for their predatory tactics, and so that we have options for generic medications, and finally to allow for imports on common prescription medications from Canada. I believe that health care is a central issue to every single family in Arkansas. We all deserve to have affordable health care, and health care that is accessible to all of our people, and that's my number one priority.
Mr. Westerman, 1 minute rebuttal, sir.
Yeah, as we think about the future and the things that are going to happen, we have to be able to get legislation across the line. It's to be able to drop a huge bill and think you're automatically going to get bipartisan support from all across this country is living a little bit in the clouds. I will continue to work hard, to work with my colleagues, to build relationships, so that we can move the ball forward, so that we can address issues like health care, so that we can address issues like immigration that unfortunately we haven't talked much about today. But we've got to secure our border. We've got to end the visa lottery program. We've got to end chain migration. We have got to deal with those children who were brought here, the DACA population, not of a fault of their own. We've got to give them legal status, but not citizenship, not the right to vote. And we've also got to deal with their parents that brought them here legally.
I had time for another question. Ms. LaRue goes first to Ms. Shamel.
Ms. Shamel, both you and your opponent have touched on several different economic issues throughout the evening. What do you believe is the best strategy to encourage and spur economic growth within the 4th District?
I think that we need to be focused on the people, and I mentioned this before. A central platform of my campaign is ensuring that we have a livable wage, that our people can earn decent wages here in the 4th District, where 1 out of every 4 are living in poverty. Our people deserve to know that they can take care of their kids, and they also deserve to know that they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. You know, as an educator, I've pushed and I've pushed and I've pushed my students to succeed, to go out and to get a higher education. But more often than not, what happens is that they are successful. They do get that higher education, but then they can't come back to their hometowns to get a job because there's nothing there for them. We have to be focused on the people of Arkansas. We have to be focused above all on people and not profits, where my opponent voted to put a $1.7 trillion hole into our deficit just for the benefit of corporations, permanent tax cuts for corporations. That's the fundamental difference between the two of us. You know, I'm focused on lifting everybody up. I know that the way that we help people is by helping all people, not just those at the top. And so I'm fighting for the working class. I'm fighting to make certain that our people don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs, that they can take care of their families. Because again, at the end of the day, this campaign is about a return to caring about people and putting people first, not profits.
Mr. Westerman, 2 minutes.
Well, there my opponent goes again using Nancy's talking points. Let me tell you something. You can have people and profits. Profits are not a bad thing. That's how businesses stay in business. That's how people start new businesses, because this idea that they can make a profit, that they can hire more employees, that the economy can grow, and that people can be lifted out of poverty through that. Reagan said it best. The best anti-poverty program ever created is a job. That's still true today. The tax cuts that we put in place, that Leader Pelosi called crumbs, have benefited everyone who has a job in the 4th District of Arkansas through lower rates and being able to double the child tax credit and double the standard deduction. That's economic growth. We've reduced regulations. We will continue to do that, and we'll continue to see our economy grow. It is about people, and you're not going to see me talking in hashtags, because I know that businesses are people. You're going to see that when businesses do well, people do well. If you're not creating a friendly business environment so the real job creators or those entrepreneurs and business people, so that they can grow, you're not going to see our economy in the 4th District grow. So we've got to do more to make an environment that's more business friendly, that's going to allow job creators to do their job, and at the end of the day, people are going to see the benefits of that. And we're seeing that right now with more jobs available today than there are people who are unemployed. That's how you get higher wages. We're seeing wages increase, and just throwing a hashtag out about it's people, not profits, is not going to do anything to help our business in the 4th District.
Rebuttal, 1 minute.
Our people aren't seeing those results. You know, I've traveled the state, and our people are struggling right now. They're struggling. They're struggling because they're not being paid decent wages. You know, I've heard my opponent quote Reagan many times, the best anti-poverty program is a job. And I would agree, but I would add to that, what we need to do is to ensure that we help our people get those jobs. And we've got to concentrate on job training, on education, on job placement. But above all, we've got to concentrate again on the people. So we can call it a hashtag, but what it comes down to is that it's the truth. We've got to put our people first. People should always come before profits. And I can guarantee you this, as your next Congresswoman, regardless of what side of the political aisle you might lean, I will always fight for you and your family's best interests.
Time has come for closing statements now, the question and answer period having ended, and we thank our panel of Arkansas journalists for providing the former. And again, owing to a drawing held prior to the broadcast tonight, Mr. Westerman will deliver the first closing statement.
Well, Steve, I would like to again say thank you to you and to AETN for holding this debate. Thank you to the panelists who asked such great questions today, and thank you to everyone who joined in to watch or listen online. You know, as I look back at what happened in this debate, I think it's clear that there are two opposing opinions here. The voters have a choice. And I think about the first time I ever flew on an airplane on a rainy day. You know, I was a little bit apprehensive. It was cloudy. It was raining, and I wasn't sure about getting on an airplane and going up into the sky. But as we went through those clouds and broke through, it was very bright and sunny on the top of those clouds. It was so bright and sunny that I looked down on those clouds, and they seemed insignificant to the vastness of the bright and sunny weather outside above the clouds. And I think that's what we're facing in our country today. You've got a party that wants to tell you that everything's dreary. They want to focus on the cloudy day. But good things are happening in this country. Good things will continue to happen. And I'm going to work hard to make sure that those things happen in the 4th District of Arkansas. You know, you have a choice. You have a choice to vote for experience. You have a choice to vote for someone who's optimistic and someone who's a problem solver. Or you have a choice to vote for someone who's inexperienced, whose only affiliation with government so far has been to protest. You have a choice to vote for someone who wants to see America win versus someone who wants to whine about America. You have a choice to vote for results or to vote for resistance. I trust that the voters of the 4th District of Arkansas will make their case that they will reelect me to Congress. I'm asking you for your vote. I appreciate all that I'm able to do and the opportunities that you've given me. God bless you and have a great day.
Mr. Westerman, thank you very much. Ms. Schammel, rebuttal.
Thank you again to AETN and to all of the viewers tonight for tuning in. My name is Hayden Schammel, and I hope that tonight you've learned enough about who I am and what I believe to earn your vote as the next United States Congresswoman from Arkansas's 4th District. You know, I think that what it comes down to is this. I am so saddened by the divisiveness that we see played out on the national stage. And what I know is that I remember a time in Arkansas when we voted for people and not the political party. A time in Arkansas when we voted for the person who we knew cared about us and would listen to us and our concerns. I am that person. John F. Kennedy once said, "Let us not seek the Democratic answer or the Republican answer, but let us seek the right answer." I'm going to seek the right answer. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to fight for what's right. And I can promise you this, every single day as your next Congresswoman, I'm going to fight for you and for policies that benefit you and your family, regardless of which side of the political aisle you might lean. So thank you. My name is Hayden Schammel, and tonight I'm asking for your vote. God bless you, and God bless Arkansas.
Ms. Schammel, we thank you again, Mr. Westerman. Ms. Schammel, we thank both of you for joining our debate tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic and Republican nominees for Congress in Arkansas's 4th Congressional District. Thank you very much for joining us for Debate Week here on AETN. A lot more to come. Good night.
Major funding for Election 2018 AETN debates is provided by AARP Arkansas.